It started with the shrimp. Cold, too cold, rubber chewy. I was chewing it anyway because it gave my hands something to do besides tremble. Somewhere behind me, someone laughed that too polished corporate laugh. Half power move, half performance. And over the jazz band, through the murmurs of salespeople and HR reps trying not to sound drunk, I saw her. She wasn't looking for me. She never looks for me at these things. I don't even think she expected me to show up this time. I wasn't invited. Let's just put that out there now. Her assistant forgot to include me in the +1. It was a clerical error, Margot would say later, twisting her wedding ring like it was trying to escape her finger. But I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for proof. Proof that I wasn't insane. That the distance wasn't just in my head. That I wasn't crazy for noticing her lipstick shades had shifted from rose to power red. That she'd started charging her phone face down. That her texts now had gaps where laughter used to be. So yeah, I crashed it. I stood by the catering table with a name badge that said, Logistics Consultant, printed it at home, pretending to know what that meant. I watched her laugh with him. A man I'd never seen, but who somehow looked like everything I wasn't. Confident, relaxed, wearing shoes with no socks like he owned the air around his ankles. Then she spotted me. Her face didn't register surprise. It registered calculation. That was the first dagger. She walked toward me like we were in a sitcom. Smile rehearsed, dress perfect. And when she got close enough to touch, she did the thing she used to do, the fingers brushing the lapel, the half tilt of her head. I stepped back, leaned in, whispered like a man watching his house burn. Not after. The music kept playing. But for me, it all went quiet. She stood there, caught in some glitch of disbelief, her hand still midair like a code that hadn't finished executing. And that's when I knew I had to go home and open everything. The emails, the backups, the shared cloud she forgot was still syncing to the living room tablet. I'm not writing this for sympathy. I'm writing because what I found next wasn't just betrayal. It was orchestration. I didn't go home right away. After whispering those two words, not after, I walked out of that overpriced rooftop venue and just wandered. Past a dry fountain that smelled like chlorine and shame. Past a street magician who was doing coin tricks for no one. Past a hot dog stand where the vendor looked at me like I'd just lost a war. I eventually found myself at the all-night pharmacy down the block. Not sure why. Maybe I was buying time before going back to the house. Maybe I wanted to see if numbness had a cure. I stood there staring at a row of off-brand sleep aids, trying to decide whether to sedate my heartbreak or caffeinate my rage. I ended up buying a chocolate milk and a lighter. Back at the house, I didn't turn on the lights. Just sat in the guest room, our reading room, the one that never had books, only her treadmill and my shame. The tablet was right where I left it, dead and ignored, wedged between throw pillows on the futon. I plugged it in like a thief disarming a bomb. The screen lit up with a soft glow, and a notification popped in. iMessage from my favorite problem. I hadn't even unlocked the thing yet. Let me tell you something about heartbreak. It doesn't arrive all at once. It drips, like a faucet. Every ping of her phone was another drop. I didn't open the thread right away. I went to the iCloud settings, looked at the synced messages, the shared photos, the backups. She'd been careful, smart, but not perfect. There was a hidden folder in notes titled simply, Offsite. Inside were schedules, names, codes, a list of hotel bookings under initials. I didn't even know she used Apple Notes. She always swore by a leather journal she kept locked in her nightstand. One I now suspect was full of distractions for people like me, people too tired to notice. Then I opened the message thread. I didn't even know who my favorite problem was at first. But once I saw the photos, the ones she said she didn't do, I started recognizing locations. Our kitchen, our couch, our bed while I was out of town last February helping my brother after his surgery. She'd said she was in a nesting phase that weekend. Turns out she was feathering it for someone else. The worst part? She joked about me. I read one message where she said, "He still thinks I get migraines. El Mao. I just don't want to hear about projector bulbs anymore." That one actually made me dizzy. I closed the tablet and sat there in the dark, holding the chocolate milk I hadn't touched, wondering if I was more pathetic for trusting her or for still loving her through the hate. I could have confronted her that night, could have blown the whole thing open. But I didn't. Because the tablet revealed something else. Someone else. A second name. A second thread. a second man. This wasn't an affair, it was a system, and if I told anyone now, they'd only see the scandal. But I needed them to see the pattern. The third man wasn't who I expected. In fact, I almost missed him entirely. After finding that second thread, messages between Margot and a guy named CH, I stayed up the entire night cataloging screenshots, tagging files, creating a folder system on my desktop like I was building a case file for a federal agency. I don't know why I got so methodical. Maybe it was the only part of my life I still had control over. You start organizing betrayal when your reality's a mess, I guess. What struck me most about this second guy was how normal he seemed. Not rich, not flashy, not some smooth-talking yacht hopper. Just a guy named Cal, short for Calvin apparently, who worked in the regional supply chain. I found a shared calendar invite for a midweek wellness walk at the Botanical Gardens. I cross-checked the date with her GPS location history, which, yes, she also forgot to disable on the iPad. She told me she had a therapy appointment that day, that she'd cried afterward. I remember telling her I was proud of her for working on herself. I even made her chamomile tea that night. I wish I could go back and slap myself across the face. So, here I am. 2 men, 2 different stories, 2 different types of deception. But it wasn't until I started looking through her Apple Notes again that I noticed something strange, a recurring name that didn't match either of the first 2. It wasn't in the contacts, wasn't in any messages, but it was mentioned in a checklist titled Q2 Playbook. The name was Jonah. Now, you have to understand, at this point my body was functioning on stress and instant coffee. My hands were shaking. My left eye had this weird twitch going on. But the moment I saw that name, I felt a different kind of panic. It rang a bell, but not from Margot's world. It was mine. I clicked through old emails. Jonah. Where had I seen that? Then it hit me like a cinder block. He was our former neighbor. We shared a lawnmower. He helped me unclog our gutter once while Margot was out of town. I remember thanking him with a 6-pack of imported beer that Margot said was too expensive. The kicker? He moved out over a year ago, right around the time Margot started working late more often. I didn't have proof yet, but I had a lead, so I did something I swore I wouldn't do. I created a fake account and messaged him. Just casual at first. Asked how he was settling into his new place. Asked if he ever missed the old neighborhood. Then I brought up Margot, real casual. Hey man, my wife said you two still keep in touch sometimes. That true? I watched those 3 typing dots appear, then vanish, then reappear. Finally, he replied, Hey, I don't really want to get in the middle of anything. Can we talk on the phone? That was it. I knew. The next morning, we talked for 21 minutes and 14 seconds. He admitted to everything, said it started as a casual conversation over wine and turned into a complicated situation. I didn't yell, didn't cry, just thanked him for being honest. He asked me not to tell her we spoke. She still doesn't know we did. You want to know the worst part? Jonah ended things with her. He said he couldn't take the emotional guilt. She cried about it to me that week, claimed she was just feeling emotionally blocked, and I held her. I held her while she mourned the end of an affair I didn't know existed. That's when it hit me. She never accidentally left the iPad syncing. She didn't forget to delete those notes. Part of her wanted me to find it. Maybe not consciously, maybe just deep down, but still, something in her wanted the lies to unravel. So, I started digging for the why. That's what part 4 is about, because behind every betrayal is a trigger, and what I found next didn't just involve her, it involved me. Before I get into what I found about myself, yes, myself, let me just say something no one ever tells you. When your marriage begins to rot from the inside, it doesn't smell at first. The walls still stand, the paint still looks fresh. But one day, you touch the surface, and it caves in like damp drywall. I'd always thought if Margot ever cheated, it would be because I'd done something wrong, that I'd missed a milestone, that I'd ignored her needs. But the reality was far more twisted. It all started with a voicemail, not from Margot, from a number I didn't recognize. A woman's voice, calm, a little uncertain, said, "Hi, I'm trying to reach Eldon. I hope this is still your number. I'm calling about something personal. I think we should talk. It's about Margot. I'm not trying to cause trouble, but, well, I'll leave it at that." I played it 3 times, each time convincing myself it was spam, but something about the way she said my name, Not like a stranger, like someone who already knew me. I called her back. Her name was Claudia. She worked in HR at Margot's company. I'd met her once, at the holiday mixer a year prior. We'd talked about eggnog and how none of it actually has eggs. The conversation had lasted 6 minutes. I never thought I'd hear from her again. She started slow, clearly afraid of what she was doing. She said there'd been rumors at the office for months, not just about Margot's relationships, but about how she used them. The phrase Claudia used was performance alignment. Margot had apparently been manipulating interdepartmental politics using what Claudia delicately referred to as emotional leverage. That leverage, I came to realize, meant people, men, not just for companionship, for advancement, for access, for positioning. But here's where it turned into something else entirely. Claudia told me that she was on a review committee 2 years ago, the same quarter Margot got promoted early, bypassing internal policy. The vote had been deadlocked until I got involved, and I didn't even realize I had. See, Margot had asked me to write a vendor experience summary back then. Just something casual, she said. From my point of view, as someone outside their organization who had visited her office. She fed me lines, stuff about client care, innovation culture. She said it was just an anonymous staff story for their website. I believed her. Typed it out in under 30 minutes and emailed it from my personal account. Turns out she submitted it under the name of an actual external consultant, someone whose firm had backed out at the last second. She used my fake testimonial as part of a package to justify increased client exposure in her department, which helped justify her leapfrog promotion. So, yeah, I helped her climb the ladder. I was the alibi, the supporting document. The invisible assistant. I was the guy behind the girl behind the curtain. When Claudia told me that, I didn't know whether to laugh or vomit. I hung up without saying much. I sat there in the kitchen, staring at the ceramic owl salt shaker we bought in Asheville. The one Margot said looked endearingly stupid. I stared at it for 15 minutes like it was about to give me answers. Then I remembered something else. Something small. Months ago, I was installing a security update on Margot's laptop. I'd seen a PDF titled Outline V for final.pdf. I assumed it was work-related and didn't open it. But now, with everything bubbling up, I needed to see what it was. It was a list, a literal breakdown. Names, departments, strengths, leverage points. She wrote the word pliable next to some people. One entry read, Eldon, spouse, reliable. Emotionally transparent, easily redirected. Doesn't question intentions. It felt like reading my own autopsy report. She hadn't just betrayed me physically. She'd studied me like a case file, weaponized my faith in her like a scalpel. This wasn't a marriage. It was a project. And I was the foundation she stepped on to build something shinier. In part 5, I'll tell you how I finally confronted her. Not with yelling, not with screaming, with a breakfast table, 2 mugs, and a USB stick. Because if she treated this like strategy, I figured I'd show her what it's like when the chessboard flips. The day I confronted her didn't start like a showdown. It started like any other Tuesday in our house. Quiet, slightly awkward. A soft shuffle routine of avoiding eye contact under the hum of the espresso machine. I woke up early, even though I hadn't really slept. I didn't want to rehearse. I didn't even know what I was going to say yet. All I knew was that I wasn't going to raise my voice. She'd expect rage. I wanted her to feel calculation. I wanted her to taste the silence she'd weaponized for months. I made breakfast. Eggs, toast, nothing dramatic. I made her coffee the way she liked it. Oat milk, a pinch of cinnamon, 1 sugar. I set the table, added 2 napkins. Then I placed the USB stick right next to her fork, like a garnish. When she walked into the kitchen in that gray robe she always claimed was barely decent, I saw the shift in her expression the moment her eyes hit the flash drive. It was like someone had turned off the autopilot inside her. She didn't speak right away, just sat. Then, slowly, carefully, reached for her mug without touching the drive. "What is this?" she asked. I didn't look up from my plate. I just said, "You should watch it before work." She didn't move. "Eldon, what is it?" I looked at her then, and I wish I could tell you I felt powerful, vindicated. I didn't. I just felt tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that seeps into your joints, your breath, your soul. I said, "It's your real Q2 report, the one you didn't present." That's when her face cracked. Not fully, just slightly. Around the mouth, near the eyes. She reached out and pulled the USB toward her, like it might burn her. Didn't ask anything else. Just stood and left the room. No plate touched, no words exchanged. While she was in the office, I watched the footage again myself. Not because I needed to, because I needed to remember what it felt like to finally have the truth in order. Every file, every screenshot, every cross-reference timestamp. The folder had 4 primary sections. The off-site note files, including her internal code for each affair. Screenshots from her messaging apps, including conversations where she scheduled meetups and mocked my routines. Audio recordings. Yes, I recorded 2 conversations through our smart speaker after I figured out how to patch the signal. Legal? Maybe not, but moral clarity doesn't always wait for legal advice. A copy of the testimony email Claudia had sent me, complete with internal company notes and a redacted list of the people Margot had supposedly moved through. It was all there, unarguable, stitched together into a single timeline. She got home just before 7. She walked in like a shadow, quiet, careful, composed. I was at the dining table, doing nothing, just sitting with a glass of water and a notebook open to a blank page. I remember that very specifically. Because that blank page, it wasn't symbolic, it was real. It was me, not knowing what to write next. She sat across from me without asking. "You made copies?" she said. It wasn't a question. "I made backups of the backups." Long silence. "I don't even know what to say," she whispered. "That's fine," I replied. "I didn't do this for an apology." Another pause. "Then why?" I looked her in the eye for the first time in weeks. "Because you've been playing chess against someone who didn't even know they were on the board. And now that I do know, I'm not going to flip the table. I'm going to record every move." She stayed still, but I could see her pulse rising in her neck. She was calculating now. Next steps, possible denials, fallback narratives. But I'd taken all of it away. The narrative was mine now, not hers. And then she said, the most baffling thing I've ever heard. "You really don't see it, do you?" I blinked. "But see what? That this," she gestured to the space between us, "was always going to break. I just got tired of waiting for you to admit it." It wasn't anger, it was disappointment, and that hurt more than anything else. Not because she was right, but because she'd rewritten history in her own head, and I had been edited out of my own marriage. But that wasn't even the end. Not yet. Because after she went to bed, separate rooms obviously, I got a message on my anonymous account. From someone else entirely, a woman, a stranger. And she said she had something I needed to see about Margot. Part 6 isn't about the affairs. It's about the game Margot's been playing for longer than I ever imagined. And who else has been watching from the sidelines. The message came at 1:17 a.m. I was wide awake. Of course I was. And scrolling through archived emails like I was going to suddenly spot some magical sentence that explained how a marriage turns into a crime scene. The ping nearly startled me. I checked the account, the anonymous one I'd used to contact Jonah and Calvin, and there it was. A new DM. The profile had no photo, no followers, no visible name. Just a handle. @VariantThorn. The message was short. "You're not the only one. If you want answers, ask her about Pinedale." Pinedale! My brain tried to latch onto it. Was it a person, a company, a project, a hotel? I stared at that single word like it was a puzzle I was supposed to already know how to solve. I messaged back. Just one word. "Who are you?" No reply. Not then. And that's when I made my second mistake that night. I Googled Pinedale. Not because I expected a neon sign saying Margot's double life started here, but because I needed something to hold on to. What I found turned my stomach. Pinedale wasn't a person or a place. It was a leadership retreat. One of those boutique executive recalibration intensives where corporate climbers go to sweat out their trauma in the woods while doing group trust falls and learning how to speak their power. It took place last September in Vermont. I remember that weekend. Margot had told me she was in Boston for a marketing summit. She even brought home a branded mug and said the sessions were inspiring. I still have the mug. It's on my desk, full of dead pens. The retreat's website was full of glossy stock photos. Campfires, meditation circles, barefoot professionals balancing on logs. And right there on the client testimonials page, third one down, was a quote attributed to a Margot H. The text read, Pinedale made me realize I've been playing small for too long. I left behind a version of myself that served others. Now I serve my own truth. I clicked her name. No last name shown, but the photo, it was her. Not a corporate headshot, a candidate, wind in her hair, a kind of unburdened grin I hadn't seen in years, and never once directed at me. I stared at that screen, piecing it together. That retreat was the fracture point. That was the weekend she came back more centered, less argumentative, and way more distant. I had chalked it up to exhaustion, a change in her hormones, stress. What I didn't realize is that she'd come back decided. I scoured the rest of the page and eventually landed on a downloadable PDF titled Pinedale Cohort Roster, Fall Session. It listed all 30 participants, along with their industries and leadership focus areas. Most of the names meant nothing, but buried halfway down, one caught me cold. Claudia VHR/organizational realignment/conflict integration. Claudia, the same woman who had called me, the same one who warned me in a voicemail just days earlier. Suddenly, her hesitation made sense. She was there. She saw things. Maybe even participated in whatever inner circle enlightenment session cracked Margot open and replaced her with someone else. At this point, I felt like I was drowning in layers. Affairs, manipulation, power games. And now, philosophical engineering, personal reinvention seminars that rewired her morality like it was an old OS. So I called Claudia again, straight up, no pretext. This time she answered. I asked her one question. What happened at Pinedale? Silence on the line, then finally, you need to understand, it wasn't some cult. It wasn't brainwashing. It was guided unshackling. That's what they called it. Unshackling from what? I asked, my voice rising. From expectation, from guilt, from roles we didn't choose. And Margot, she took it further than anyone. She went on to explain that Pinedale encouraged attendees to write a life restructuring plan, a real formal document listing out emotional dependencies, perceived entanglements, and what they called the constructive purges. According to Claudia, Margot's plan was one of the most clinically efficient they'd ever seen. She'd mapped out everything, who to distance, what obligations to end, which attachments to keep for utility, and I was listed under utility. She didn't hate you, Claudia said softly, but she made a choice to step into a version of herself that no longer had room for compromise. I don't remember hanging up. I don't remember walking to the bathroom or staring into the mirror until the sun started to rise. I just remember feeling like someone had replaced the floor beneath me with a blueprint, and I'd never known I was standing on plans. In part 7, I'll tell you how I finally decided to leave, not with a fight, not with a breakdown, but with a submission of my own. Because if Margot could draft a plan to remove me from her world, I decided I'd create something she never could predict. A version of me that no longer waited to be chosen. It's a strange feeling when you stop asking why someone hurt you. When the anger fades not into forgiveness, but into a quiet, measured indifference. I think people misunderstand that word, indifference. They confuse it with bitterness or suppression. But true indifference, the kind I felt by the time I reached my decision, is clarity. It's the moment the fire goes out and you stop looking for warmth in the ruins. After the Pinedale revelation, I didn't speak to Margot for 3 full days. We shared a home, yes, but we lived like 2 strangers in a library, silent, observant, constantly on edge. I didn't confront her. I didn't show her the cohort PDF. I didn't ask about Claudia or Jonah or the constructive purges. I already knew she would either lie or reframe it as necessary. I wasn't interested in her defense anymore. I wasn't even interested in her guilt. I wanted to leave before she had the chance to act like letting me go was her gift. So I began building my own exit, quietly, like she did. I took notes. I mapped timelines. I started photographing every document in the house that had my name attached. Mortgage forms, car titles, insurance paperwork, her old contracts that still listed me as an emergency contact. It was astonishing how many strings were still tied to me, even after she mentally filed me under redundant. And then I wrote a letter, not to her, to myself. It was a stupid exercise at first, something I saw on a Reddit post about post-narcissistic recovery. Write the version of yourself that no longer begs, it said. So I did. I wrote a full page, single-spaced, to a man I hadn't met yet. A man who didn't ask for validation in the eyes of someone who studied his kindness like a flaw. A man who didn't explain his softness or apologize for wanting to be loved gently. I called it the after letter. Then came the plan. I booked a storage unit under my middle name in a town 20 minutes away. I began moving out essentials one backpack at a time. Passports, USB copies, my old notebooks, spare keys, even the sentimental things, photos she never looked at, my dad's cufflinks, the dog tags from when I served. Yeah, I was military. Hard to believe after all this melodrama, huh? Ironic how I survived foreign deployments and still lost everything at home. On the 5th night, I waited until she fell asleep and went into the bedroom for what I knew would be the last time. She was curled into herself, a silk sleep mask pulled halfway up her forehead. She looked peaceful. It struck me as cruel that she could still sleep so soundly. I didn't touch her, didn't kiss her goodbye, just stood there and whispered so softly it was barely air. "You won." That was the last thing I said to her. The next morning, she woke to find the front door ajar, the guest room empty, my phone left on the kitchen counter beside a sticky note that said nothing but, "Pinedale." I didn't go nuclear. I didn't torch her career or release what I had, though I easily could have, and maybe some part of me still might. But what mattered to me in that moment wasn't revenge. It was distance. I needed to disappear in a way that she couldn't control. That was the only way this ended on my terms. I moved into a short-term rental outside town. The walls are bare, the mattress is thin. But there's something liberating about being in a space that holds no memories. I've started journaling again. I take walks. I make coffee at 11 p.m. because I can. And slowly I'm realizing that the silence I used to fear, it's not empty, it's mine, but the story doesn't end there. Of course it doesn't, because 2 nights ago, I got an email. No subject line, no sender I recognized, just one sentence in the body. "She's not finished with you. Part 8 is the final chapter. And I need to tell you what she's done since I left, because some people don't chase you to bring you back. They chase you to make sure you stay ruined." The email haunted me for 3 days before I opened it again. Not because I feared Margot, no. That part of me had already been hollowed out and replaced with something stronger. But because I didn't know what her endgame was anymore. Was she angry that I left without letting her frame the narrative? Was she embarrassed, threatened, or just unwilling to lose control of something she used to hold in the palm of her hand? Eventually, I did what I'd done too often throughout this story. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. I assumed she'd let it go, that once I was out of sight, I'd finally be out of mind. I stopped checking the anonymous account. I stopped replaying conversations. I focused on the small things, cutting fresh fruit for breakfast, learning how to paint watercolors badly, and talking to my neighbor's golden retriever like we were old army buddies. Then came the knock on the door. It was late morning. I'd been reading in the kitchen, yes, actually reading again, something I'd somehow stopped doing years ago. When I opened the door, I saw Claudia standing there, in jeans and a loose sweater, holding a manila envelope like it was radioactive. She didn't ask to come in. She just handed me the folder and said, "I figured you'd want to know the truth, all of it." Then she turned and walked away. Inside the folder were printed screenshots, internal HR memos, and one signed resignation letter from Margot, effective immediately, no payout, no references, no public-facing announcement. It wasn't about her being caught. It was about her unraveling. Apparently, after I left, something in her cracked. Claudia said she came into work the next Monday looking hollow, and by Thursday, she was gone. No goodbye lunch, no final handshake. The memos made it clear that her personal web of manipulation had begun to spread wider than anyone realized. Not just romantic entanglements, but power plays, career sabotage, even passive blackmail. People had started putting things together. But no one had the guts to speak, until Claudia did. I expected to feel vindicated reading it, but I didn't. I just felt done. And in that space of finality, something new happened, something real. I met someone. It wasn't some cinematic meet cute. There was no spilled coffee or accidental bump on a street corner. It was the result of me deciding, for once, to say yes to a neighbor's dinner invite. Her name is Beth. She teaches art therapy at a local nonprofit. She's got this quiet calm about her, like the kind of person who doesn't flinch at silence, who lets conversations breathe. We talked about everything but the past. I didn't tell her about Margot right away, not for weeks. And when I finally did, I didn't frame it as tragedy. I just told the truth. I spent years loving someone who taught me how to stop loving myself, and now I'm learning how to build again. Beth didn't try to fix me. She just listened. And that was enough. So this is where the story ends, Reddit. Not with revenge, not with some last-minute twist where Margot shows up at my door begging to rewrite the past. No courtroom drama, no dramatic breakdown. Just this. A man who used to think love meant staying through pain. Learning that sometimes love is walking away before you forget who you are. And even better, sometimes if you're patient, if you're honest, if you stop running from the silence, you meet someone who reminds you how to laugh again. Not in the way Margot did, in a way that asks for nothing back. Thanks for reading. Here's to the after. Eldon.